I'd like to introduce our next speakers, Ryan Couto and Josh Brodin from WSP. Ryan has a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Brown University, as well as a master's degree in structural engineering from Northeastern. He's currently a supervising structural engineer and a project manager. Josh received his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from WPI, and currently works as an assistant engineer specializing in lighting for roadways and transportation structures.
Thanks everybody for having us. It's really exciting to be here for sure. So today Josh and I are going to talk a little bit about our engineering paths, somewhat similar, somewhat different in some ways. So you'll hear first from a structural engineer, and then you hear from kind of a jack of all trades engineer over here. We both work at WSP. Right. So WSP, and now I got to speed it up. WSP, 42,000 employees worldwide. In the U.S., roughly 7,000. In Boston, 400 across 2 offices. And in the Boston office, we do all engineering disciplines: civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, cost estimating, scheduling, project controls, a little bit of construction. We focus on projects, big infrastructure projects, like I mentioned, highways, bridges, rail projects, commuter rail, airports, big stuff like that, the large infrastructure type projects. My group in particular is the Transportation Facilities Group. We focus on building design, anything related to transportation, so parking garages, airports, bus facilities, transit stations, and we focus primarily on structural engineering, structural analysis and design, but we do have an architecture group as well, and we also do some graphics and visualization. We do all of our projects in 3D, building information modeling. Josh will talk a little bit about that side of thing in a little bit. And construction phase services. Most of our projects we see right through from concept right through to construction. So we follow our projects all the way through. A little bit about me, brief timeline. Born in New Bedford, Mass. I grew up in that area. Went to Bishop Stang High School in Dartmouth. I was a proud captain of an 0-10 football team, as well as the president of the physics club. So I did pretty well for myself there in high school. Graduated from Brown University in 2007. And then I joined WSP right after I graduated. We were Parsons Brinkerhoff at the time. 2011, I got married to my lovely wife. I would be remiss if I didn't add that to my important timeline here. 2012, I became a licensed professional engineer. And then 2013, a big year for me. I stamped my first plans as the engineer of record. I don't know if any of you have flown out of JetBlue recently at Logan Airport, the Terminal C. I did all the structural design and project oversight for the Terminal C to Terminal E connector, the big rotunda where they added the Wahlburgers, the Starbucks, all that fun stuff in there. So that was a labor of love for me for a while. The first time my wife and I flew out of there after that project was done, she stopped the passenger and took a picture of us together. She was like, "My husband designed this." But also in 2013, I finished my grad school. I did it part-time while I was working full-time. Don't recommend that. It was not very fun. I was also training for a 100-mile trail race at the same time. That took me 29 and a half hours. And I managed my first project as a project manager in 2013, so it was a big year. 2016, I was promoted to deputy group manager, got more involved in the career development side and the recruitment, project pursuit side, and technical principal as well. And then 2017, last year, I presented at a national conference. So that was my timeline in a nutshell. Focusing now a little bit more on my career path. I started out in 2007 as a structural design assistant, graduated from Brown, and then I was an assistant to a lot of the structural engineers we had in our office. Checked calcs, worked on some smaller stuff, worked closely with them, kind of earned my stripes, if you will. Learned a little bit more about structural design, and then I progressed into running my own design calculations, leading the design of some smaller projects, progressing as I went forward. In 2010, I started getting more involved in the construction oversight side of things. After I developed the design, I would go out in the field, work with the contractor, the client, the construction manager, to make sure that our design intent was being carried through in the buildings that we were designing. Then in 2013, as I mentioned, I started getting more involved in the project management side of things. And currently, I've started to get more involved into the business development and be more of a technical advisor on projects. Less so of kind of designing the beams and columns, WL²/8 and things like that, and more so into the project pursuits. How are we going to approach these big, massive projects? How are we going to win them? How are we going to gain our clients' trusts? So developing the business on that side, and also internally developing our group. How are we going to identify the best next young structural engineers to join our company and continue the success our company's had for the past 150 years? And so getting a little bit more into detail in terms of what I've done, and then we'll take you through what I'm doing and what I'll be doing in the future. As I mentioned, when I started out, I was doing pure structural design, running beam designs, column designs. One of my first big projects, the first building I designed, was the Logan Airport Consolidated Rental Car Facility. That's one of the buildings you'll drive by as you go to the terminals. The big parking garage and customer service center in front. That customer service center in front was the first building I designed from start to finish. I also worked on the massive Harvard Science Complex as a peer reviewer. There was a very complex specialty structural engineering firm that did the actual design. I worked as a peer reviewer, working for the client, ensuring the safety of their design. And there's just some snapshots there. There's the rental car facility on the left, and then a rendering of what, at one time, the architects thought the Harvard Science Complex was going to look like. And then so as I kind of developed more of my skills, I got more into a side of structural engineering and building design that they don't really teach you in school. And that's how your designs, your structural engineering designs, are impacted and impact the other building systems. And I got more into the cross-disciplinary coordination. When I was going through school, I kind of just innocently thought that I was just going to design my beams and columns and be done with my building, and it was going to get built. But unsurprisingly, you get into the design field, and then you got to coordinate with the mechanical engineer, the electrical engineer, the plumbing engineer, and of course they all want to fit space for their building systems in the building too. And then there's the architect. I mean, that's a whole nother. We could do a whole nother hour lecture on the architect structural coordination. But this is just a snapshot here of our 3D building model and the underground utilities model, where we had to bring them together, identify where the clashes were, and identify those on the plan so that when they're building these systems in the field, there's no major clashes, there's no major stopping points for them. And then as I got more involved in the construction oversight side of things, I'd be more regularly in the field, working with the contractors, like I said, making sure that they're building the building the way that we intended it when we were carrying out the design. This is actually a project that's under construction right now, 100,000 square foot expansion of Terminal B over at Logan Airport. It will ultimately consolidate the checkpoint, be a nice open space for concessions, and have these lovely structural steel tree columns that will be exposed to everybody. And it'll be a really exciting passenger experience to go through there. As I mentioned, the first project I stamped as an engineer of record was really, truly a labor of love. It was the connection between Terminal C and Terminal E. And a major part of the project was expanding this big rotunda area, which was previously just a concrete box. The challenge of working at the airport, though, is it never closes. It never stops. Operations are continually 24/7. So this is actually a video that I won't waste time showing it, but essentially we had to build the building around the existing building and then dismantle the existing building from the inside out by cutting it with concrete saws, then lifting them out of a hole in the new roof that we were building and taking piece by piece out. And we had to do these at specific hours of construction because we couldn't impact the passenger experience. We couldn't be picking up these 100-ton concrete pieces while there's passengers going underneath. So that's another aspect of my job that I never thought I'd be doing when I was at Brown running my beam calculations. Like identifying the major construction logistics impacts, understanding the needs of the owners, really trying to understand the impacts of the structural designs and the projects we were carrying out. And so now, currently where I'm at and where I'm moving forward with is, again, another avenue that I never would have expected myself to be headed. And that's more on the business development side of things and major complex project management. One of the projects that I'm working on right now on the project management side is the demolition and reconstruction of the massive canopy structure that's in front of the existing Terminal C. If you've been out there recently, you can see it's a big, bulky, kind of lurching structure. We're looking to demolish it and replace it with something more modern, a little bit more sleek, a little bit fancy, a little bit more signature, something that Logan Airport is really trying to modernize themselves with. And I've gotten more involved with project pursuits. This is something that's really exciting for me. working with my company to identify the next big project and how we can win it, how we can differentiate ourselves from the other major engineering players in the community, and how we can demonstrate to our clients that we can deliver these projects better and more efficiently and more effectively than they can. So it's actually something that's been really exciting for me. A couple weeks ago, I went out to Chicago to work with one of our teams out there to pursue this massive $2.6 billion subway extension project that they're working on. So I got to meet some of the team out there and really collaborate on how we were going to go forward and deliver a project like this. And I've also been, this is one of my favorite parts, I've been getting more involved with the career development and recruiting. And I really take a lot of pride in this. We're a company of 42,000 people, but each person is important to the company and extremely important to me. So I go to all the career fairs in the area. I love meeting the students. I love hearing how excited they are to get into the field that I love so much. And I love identifying the ones that I think would be a great fit for our company. And I'll actively pursue them. And I'll be persistent, really identifying the ones that I think would be a great fit for us, bring them in, have them meet the people in our office, and make sure that we get the right people for our group. So that's been a real exciting part of it for me. Like I said, even with a large company, 42,000 people, I feel like I have a direct effect on bringing in the people I want in my group and I want working with me on my team. So there's just a picture of my happy team there. We took actually just a couple days ago over at the Logan Airport site. So before I turn it over to Josh here, I just want to touch real quick on my life lessons. So Russ kind of identified, he asked me to talk a little bit briefly about how I got to where I am today, and what I feel has contributed to some of the success I've had. Number one, work hard. There's no substitute for working hard, for sure. Be nice. This is extremely important to me and the people that are on my team. Unless you're doing a very specialized field, you're never working alone. You're working with people. And you got to think about the people that you want on your team, and you got to think about the impact of your actions on them and how the team dynamics are created. So be nice, please. Go above and beyond. Differentiate yourself. This is something I think about all the time. As I mentioned, when we pursue big projects like that, I'm always thinking, how can we be different? How can we be better than the others? And it's so competitive. Everything is so competitive nowadays. It's crazy. I opened a position in my group a couple weeks ago for an entry-level structural engineer. Within a week, I had over 200 resumes. So the importance is differentiate yourself. Go above and beyond. Go above and beyond the bare minimum. Hustle. Be persistent. Be very persistent, and never stop hustling. Never stop moving forward. Never stop trying to. I don't want to jump ahead to number 6, but be bettering yourself. Chase your passions. This is something that's really important to me too, and part of the reason why I'm here. When I met Russ, I could tell how passionate he was about what he does, and this event here. That I fed off of his passion. I said, when you do the next one, I want to be there. I want to present there. So I think that's really important. And when I was going down a couple months ago to our corporate office in New York City, and I had to present a value creation idea for my company to our CEO. And I was talking to one of my close friends who's a senior project manager, was previously one of the project managers of the Big Dig. And I was talking to him, and I said, I'm trying to think of what I can present to this CEO that he hasn't already thought of. And he said, the best piece of advice I can give you is present on something you're passionate about. And it's so true. I went down there and presented on something that I was really passionate about, and it took off. It felt so natural. I walked out of there, and it was the best presentation I ever gave, and I felt great. And that's so important. So just chase your passions, for sure. And the last one, never stop improving and bettering yourself. It's so critical, so important. One of the things that I do in all my meetings with my team and my clients and my other team members, at the end of every meeting or every session we have, I take 5 minutes to do a plus delta. And I put it up on the board. The pluses are the things that the team felt that brought value to our session, and delta is anything that we would change or modify for the next session. And it instills that continuous improvement mindset in our team. What can we be doing better? What are we doing well that we should continue? And what can we be doing better? So we're always continuously thinking of how we can improve and differentiate ourselves. So with that, I hope I didn't take too much time, but Josh, off to you.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. All right, so I took a slightly different approach. I'm like fairly new to the industry, so I don't like have all this professional experience. So I'm just gonna talk about like so where I started out in like high school, like I don't know, 9 years ago, and then what I do for my job and what I did to get there. So yep, here's me in high school. I'm the scrawny kid on the far right. So in high school, I was involved in like a number of clubs. So track and field, I was in that for all 4 years, as well as cross country. Very fun time. I was on math team. We actually competed with Sharon regularly back in the day, and they like totally destroyed us. But we got you guys in track and field, so it's all good. I also did a mock trial. I'm like super introverted and shy, so that was like a huge jump for me, and I like totally embarrassed myself like so many times over, but got my confidence up, presenting in front of people. I was a math tutor. That was pretty interesting. And then National Honor Society, and that was a good way to get involved in community service. So I don't know, I'd say that's like fairly typical for high school, though I might just be out of touch. So yes, going ahead to what I do today, I'm like a lighting designer of sorts. And so basically what my group does is we like create a concept. So a client will come in, they'll be like, oh, so we want like some sort of like light show on like this building. We'll be like, okay, well, we'll come up with something and like hand it off to you, and if you like what it looks like, we'll do the science and math behind it and get it to work. So so create the concept, we get the approval from the client, we make the calculations, we render the expected output. So like this series of images up here, that's a rendering I did, or series of renderings rather, based on actual mathematical calculations. I just plug it into the computer and use like drawings to figure out the geometry of the model, and that should be what we expect the bridge to look like. And then after like all this is done, we just build it. So for this particular image, I start out with the base white up top, and then the client is like, oh, can you do like Halloween? Can you like model after our sports clubs? And I'm like, sure, let's give it a shot. So, like in the middle here, you can see I tried to do like orange for Halloween. I turned off like some of the arch lights and tried to give it a spooky feel. And then on the far bottom left, they have a sports club down there. I think it's like Orlando City, might be soccer. I'm not totally sure. But anyway. So yeah, this is a concept. This is an image I drew up. This is for the Boston Tea Party Museum down in downtown Boston. One of my coworkers, a older dude named Jeff, he just came up to me. He's like, oh, Josh, so I'm like trying to pursue this job. The Boston Tea Party Museum really wants to like make their structure like more beautiful. And then he just like gave me this laundry list of things I was supposed to do. So he was like, okay, I want like the lights, there to be some lights on the water. I want it to be like bright and multicolored. I want like this sign lit up. And then like he listed all these things. I'm like, okay, sure, Jeff, what do you have for me to work with? And he gave me like this photo of like the area at like high noon, and somehow I was like supposed to Photoshop this thing. And then he's also like, oh yeah, and this is like due tomorrow morning. And I look at the clock and it's like 3 p.m. I'm like, oh geez, thanks. And basically it can be a struggle at sometimes, but it works itself out. Sometimes it's a little late, but yeah, that's basically what we do for a concept. We make a rough Photoshop scene and then hand it off to the client. And then, if the client decides to follow through with the design, we go into the calculation phase. And so here, we're lighting. So on the far left of this image, we just have a cut sheet detailing some specific data associated with like using a particular light fixture. Actually, this image on the right here is the rotunda that I believe Ryan mentioned before, what he worked on. And yeah, basically you just use computer modeling and a variety of mathematical equations to figure out, oh, so if we use these lights in this fashion, does it like follow all the legal standards? I won't go into detail because I'll admit I don't totally understand it 100%. That's what my coworkers are for. I mostly do the art. So yeah, this is a bridge I did. So this is Pensacola Bay Bridge. It's down in Florida. It's 3 miles long. my boss pretty much did all the calculations associated with the bridge, and he said, okay, Josh, just make it pretty. These are the parameters that you have. And so for this particular bridge, I just had like the lights, start illuminating on the arch, and then they gradually like cascade outwards across like the 3 miles, then they fade out, and then they just repeat back in. It's mostly for show. Usually the client doesn't like follow through with this, even if they have like lights with color capabilities on them. They're just like, oh, we just want plain white on the bridge, and then that's that. We get that like so much. But what could be, that's the important part. And then building it, Ryan, I believe, touched upon this earlier as well. I'll just kind of glance over that. So here's just a couple of our other projects. So this is the Logan Airport. And here we have San Diego. I actually had to Photoshop this image earlier as well, the one on the left. I'm not sure if that's the one I adjusted or the one that was the original. I think that might actually be the original. But yeah, so the first half of my job is lighting design, and then the second half, basically the reason why I was hired is because I have a degree in civil engineering, and then I also like program my own video games on the side. So my boss just happened to see my resume, and he's like, oh, so Josh, I really want to get the company into like augmented reality because I believe it's like the way of the future. And he's like, oh, and I also see that you majored in civil engineering and you're a game designer, so I have the job for you. So he gave me a headset. It's the Microsoft HoloLens. It projects holograms into the room, and it's very fascinating because the holograms like remain in place like no matter where you go. And the holograms can also react to you like grabbing them or talking to them. And that little red dot in the center, there's the mouse cursor. That's what I'm looking at. And it's very fascinating. In the future, we're gonna use it to like show clients like their designs instead of just doing like a basic photo. And then I also have another image. This is me out in the field, and just clicking that there. And so for this particular project, I just had this is Whittier Bridge, and I made it so that the hologram would project itself over the existing bridge, and the sound's not on, but I'm like basically talking to the HoloLens. I'm like, oh, show lighting scheme 1 and change it red, change it to the color green, what have you. That way we can actually like see what we're doing in like real time. And I don't have a ton of time to present, otherwise I'd be going off about this for like ever. But yeah, basically there's a lot of things that this can be used for, and we're very optimistic about the future. So anyway, how did I get here? The more important part, I suppose. So I went to WPI, like I said, class of 2013 for civil engineering. And while I was there, I kept up with the track and field and cross country because, I was used to it. Great way to meet people. I joined a fraternity, Alpha Phi Omega. It was community service. In order to like stay involved, you had to do like 22 hours of community service every semester. And then I actually found myself like kind of bored at WPI. I tried like a lot of clubs and they just like weren't for me. So that's when I picked up like video game programming. I also wrote a few books. Then I also picked up marathon running. So that was fun. Ran my first one at the age of 19. And I didn't train for it, so it was a bit of a mess, but good memories. And so, let's see, during college, I only actually got myself involved in one place, just working at a warehouse. It wasn't like anything engineering related, just something put on my resume to say, oh yes, I did actually work at one point. And immediately after college, what they don't tell you is that the job market can be like kind of brutal. And so I actually applied to something like 80 different companies, and you only hear back from maybe like 3 of them. And usually, you go in for an interview and you're interviewing against like 10 other candidates, and then you just like never hear from them again. And it's like kind of awful. And so my first lucky break was with this one company. It's AAMD, I believe. I don't quite remember 100%, but I think that's them. And I was kind of desperate, and I was like looking on Craigslist, and they're like, oh, we're looking for a CAD designer, which like in the civil engineering world is like, pretty tame as far as jobs go. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll apply to this. I went in and interviewed, and I got hired shortly after, which was like wonderful. And so then I found out that they didn't have me like doing any CAD design. So like the first day I was there, they had me like watch like this tutorial about the company. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then the next week they just had me like doing secretary stuff, like filing papers. I'm like, okay, this is fine, but it's not like CAD design. And then the following week, they started having me like clean like the floors. And when they asked me to clean the bathroom, I'm like, yeah, this isn't for me. So yeah, my second job was 2 weeks total. And then I leave that out of my resume, by the way. And then my second job was at this company called Limbach. And so that one, I didn't actually get through applying. I got it through a friend. So I'm going to emphasize that in order to like get a job, you should like really network and like meet people. The best way to get a job is through someone you know. I think a statistic, and don't quote me on this, but if you just apply blindly, then you might get into like every 1 out of 100 like companies. Whereas if you apply like through another person, you have like a 1 out of 7 chance. So your chances just like go through the roof. It's very important to know. I wish I had known that earlier. So yeah, I got to Limbach through a friend, and that one, it wasn't a very good match. I was just there for a little under a year. The thing that really killed me was it was 10-hour work days, and then the commute was like an hour and a half each way. And so, I was a marathon trainer, just didn't work out. And I'm like, I'm sorry, guys, I have to leave this again. And so I left. Immediately after leaving that company, I started like looking for another place. And I got summoned to grand jury duty, which was very unfortunate. It's basically jury duty, but instead of like going to the trial, you listen to the cases before they go to court. And I was stuck on that for 2 years. And then finally, I got a lucky break. My current boss is the uncle of like one of my closest friends. And one of my closest friends just handed off my resume to him because, his uncle was an engineer. He's like, oh, Josh, I think my uncle should check out your resume. If you're not having good luck, he'll be able to like revise it for you. His uncle like read my resume. He's like, oh, I want to hire this person. And then that's how it happened. So not the best story ever, but, the more you know, right? So what would I change if I could start over at high school? 1, take more AP exams. One of my friends, this kid named Anu, he's like, I haven't taken all these AP classes, but I'm going to sign up for like these 10 AP exams and like see which ones I can like pass. I'm like, Anu, that's a stupid idea. Like, why would you do that? And then he ended up getting credit for like, 7 of his AP exams because he scored like 4s and 5s. And then I think he didn't have to do most of his freshman year because he like tested out of like all his classes. And then he took master's level classes instead and ended up like graduating with both a bachelor's and master's degree. So if you have the opportunity, just give it a shot. The second thing I wish I would have changed, knowing my preferences, I went to WPI. I think the population was a bit too small. I like, diversity. And like pretty much everyone there was like an engineer. Wasn't quite for me. Make sure you know who you are before you apply. Another important thing, try going to a college that requires internships as part of the curriculum. So at WPI, they did not have this, but like someplace like Northeastern, you go in, they actually like require that you get a job somewhere and they'll like really help you. And then after college, it's the easiest thing after to get a career somewhere. See, I'm going to skip ahead because I'm concerned I'm like pressed for time. But I guess the most important thing is to consistently try something new. So like the only reason I'm here today is because just a random series of events. There's this thing at my company, Developing Professionals Network. It's like a little club for like people who are new to the company. I'm like, sure, I'll just join this. And then pretty soon they were like holding this like event like to coincide with the Winter Olympics that we had just a while ago, where we have like people in the office do like fun little things to get to know each other better. And I ended up heading that up because they asked me. I'm like, sure, whatever. And I ended up like meeting Ryan through that, of all things. He was Team Norway. They were these little Viking hats. And then, yeah, Ryan and I just hit it off. He asked me to come to this presentation, and I have no idea where this is going to lead, but basically, try new things, and you could be pleasantly surprised.